It is my honor to introduce our next panel, System Readiness, AI as Social Infrastructure. In panel one, we asked and obtained a perspective of what must be built so that everyone can participate in a trusted environment in the human infrastructure, right? We heard everybody, without the trust, human infrastructure is not going to be able to utilize AI in the fullest extent. This panel is focused around the fact that AI is already upon us, and many of us and in our communities are not ready for it for a plethora of reasons, right? From education to social economic issues to uncertainty about fundings that are happening these days. So there's uncertainty of the official development assistance, there's migration, there's wars, there's trade wars. There's a marked sense of dissonance globally, which can give rise to the skepticism and fear of AI and the revolution that it is purported to bring. So this panel is looking to understand from a systemic point of view, what is not the lack of ideation or innovation that is holding us back, but what are the things we need to be ready, and also what accountability looks like. Before we start the panel, we will be joined by His Excellency Professor Muhammadou M.O. Ka, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Gambia to Switzerland. He is also the permanent representative to UN Office of Geneva, UNOG, and World Trade Organization. His Excellency Ka is the chairman of the UN Commission on Science and Technology for Development and the chair of WIPO's high-level conversation on IP and frontier technologies and AI. His Excellency sits at the precise intersection of global governance, AI policy, and development. His perspective on governing AI for the Global South is institutional, grounded, and urgently needed. Please welcome His Excellency Professor Muhammadou M.
Yes, a very good afternoon from Geneva here. I don't know what time is it where you are. I would assume it's in the morning. Thank you for inviting me to join this very esteemed panel and to engage on the question of technology for whom, governing artificial intelligence for development in the age of the global digital compact. So once again, thank you. But I will say that this question could not be timelier. 3 days ago, in this same city here in Geneva, 193 member states sat in the same room for the first time to discuss artificial intelligence governance at the Global Dialogue on Artificial Intelligence Governance by the UN. So technology for whom is not rhetorical. It is the live question of this week in Geneva. And I want to advance 3 thoughts to answer this broad question. One is rules, room, and rails. And that leads us to who writes the rules and who is missing from the room. Who is writing them? Formally, the architecture is now in place and it is genuinely universal on paper. The Global Digital Compact, which most of you are familiar with, mandated the Independent International Scientific Panel on Artificial Intelligence and the Global Dialogue on Artificial Intelligence Governance, which consists or composed of 40 scientists from over 140 countries. Every United Nations member state is at the table. Informally, the rules are still being written elsewhere first. In the compute and model release decisions of a handful of companies and possibly the two countries that host roughly 90% of the world's most powerful artificial intelligence compute. So the question is, who is missing? Verification capacity is missing. A government that cannot independently test or audit a frontier model certainly cannot meaningfully consent to how it is governed. I submit that sovereignty on paper, dependency on practice. My own continent, Africa, is present at the dialogue, but structurally under-resourced going in. A continent with 18% of the world's population and under 1% of global data center capacity negotiates from a very different starting line and leverage. Everyday citizens, workers, and municipal level users are missing as well. Surveys on public debate on the continent show us that artificial intelligence governance is still concentrated among our ministries, among our regulators, and private companies, making it far from the people it is meant to serve. So what is my pragmatic read? That the room is legally full, but functionally uneven. The next week is not an order seat on the table at the table. It is the capacity to use the seat, to be able to have the pen on our hands and contribute to the shaping of the rules rather than the rules made for us. We want to be not only rule takers, rule makers, co-designers, co-architects, co-owners, and sharing the values equitably. So, my friends, what must change so that we in the developing world can exactly do that, can shape and not just receive the digital feature that is coming at us at very fast pace? As I quickly advance, I would say from consultation to co-design. We in developing countries, particularly the global south, representatives need standing seats on the steering and safeguard bodies of the multilateral development banks and the artificial intelligence funds that are growing, that are now being designed, not comment periods on decisions that are already made. The second point on that, we need to move from aid logic to equity logic. I submit that we have to shift financing instruments from grants for pilots towards equity and co-ownership stakes in regional compute and in data infrastructure so that value accrues locally and not just access. And third, from national silos to pooled bargaining, regional compute hubs and joint procurement are important as African, as ASEAN, and Latin American coalitions are beginning to test. These can cut infrastructure cost by up to half and convert fragmented small markets into serious negotiating weight. And fourth, we have to shift from imported benchmarks to sovereign data and languages. National language data sets, local health and agricultural data under domestic governance rules, indeed, are the raw materials of an artificial intelligence that actually understands the global south, that understands the developing countries, that understands least developing countries, that understands small island states, that understands Africa, that understands the diversity in all these geographies. This is a policy choice and not a technology gap. From single track dependency to deliberate diversification, our countries should treat their choice of artificial intelligence infrastructure partners as a sovereignty decision with a 10-year horizon at the minimum and not a procurement decision with a 10-month horizon. I will also say that infrastructure is core. Without it, we are nowhere. We need sustainable green infrastructure. One infrastructure investment before 2030 to ensure artificial intelligence meaningfully serves development. I submit to you that a global public compute fund is urgent and is crucial, that is physically distributed as regional, publicly award compute and energy hubs on the model of, for example, the South Africa Center for High Performance Computing is a good example, and India's public compute pool already demonstrating a good starting point for us.
And I love the fact that, we are talking about who must be in the rooms, and the rules written should include all in a very even way, which I think at this point in time, it does not, as you have so clearly stated. So thank you for your perspective. Now let's move on to panel 2, where I would love to introduce our 3 esteemed panelists, starting with Her Excellency Ambassador and Permanent Representative to Malawi, of Malawi to the United Nations, Dr. Agnes Chimbiri-Molande. She is a distinguished diplomat and global governance leader, bringing the African Union voice to the conversation on AI, partnership, and accountability. Her presence connects the global policy framework to the lived realities of communities the Sustainable Development Goals are designed to reach. Welcome, Ambassador Chimbiri.
that no meaningful socio-economic progress can happen when half of the population is left behind. Our conviction to gender equality and women empowerment is driven by the recognition that women and girls are the bedrock on which social progress is based. It is for this reason that Malawi supports the proposal to consider electing a female United Nations Secretary General.
Welcome. Your Excellent Ambassador Chimbiri-Molande, Malawi is navigating a global AI governance process, right, that is largely designed, as we heard from His Excellency Ka, right, before African nations probably had a full voice, right? It's very uneven out there. So what does it actually look like for you to shape that process from where you sit? And where are the genuine openings that you see that for influence that you all can make?
Thank you very much for having me and for really inviting me to be part of this very, very important and timely conversation on AI. As Professor Muhammadou has said very clearly, conversations are ongoing and negotiations are ongoing about AI governance. And I would like to take you back a little bit that what really led to this, we used to hear on the continent of Africa about digital economy. What is this? AI, artificial intelligence. We felt it was very far. And then COVID hit us. And we realized that connectivity was key and very important. It wasn't, and the AI was not an abstract, but real. So member states here, as you know, being an ambassador and permanent representative of the UN at the UN here, we are representing governments. We are representing the people of our countries. So I represent Malawians and the government of Malawi. And governments a year ago recognized and agreed as member states that internet is a critical global facility for inclusive and equitable digital transformation. And to fully benefit from it, it must open global, be global, and also interoperable, stable, and secure. So member states also recognized that internet governance must continue to be global and multilateral. Thus, these discussions on the global AI governance at the UN really took place before African nations came up with common positions. You know how we work as African state nations, we develop a common position. However, we are aware, maybe you are aware, all of you, that the AU has a continental AI strategy. That's the one guiding us as governments to really look at how we govern AI as it really affects our people. So issues of that concern lives of people are really serious governance issues. And really, they must be managed properly. They must bring in inputs from various actors of lives of people, various stakeholders, from households, community leaders, local government structures, policymakers, technicians, researchers, and also political leaders. So everybody needs to be part of this. As the young person told us earlier on, youth must be part of this. You know, Africa has a young population. The largest young population in the world is in Africa. And we need them on the table to be part of this conversation. The women who are taking care of and developing and bringing children from early childhood, the teachers, everybody needs to be part of this conversation so that we bring on board in our policy making, global policy here at the UN and also in government level, all the issues of concerns by these people or categories of the population. So what AI governance means is that we need to relook at the governance systems in terms of whether the systems are safeguarding privacy and security of people and their lives. And the openings are there. In fact, they are there. Member states here a year ago, as I mentioned, adopted the Pact of the Future and also its annexes of the future generations and the global impact. Malawi, along the other African states, contributed to the negotiations for these documents, and we made sure that the concerns that we are aware of about the youth, the women participation, and all that, they were part of the conversations that contributed to the global governance, the digital compact. Now, following lessons from the COVID, which revealed really that communities are not connected. And why? You know, in Malawi, in fact, what we noted, I was there then doing governance. I was given the responsibility to help government. Then I was working with UNDP. So I had to support government to ensure that there's connectivity between the central government and the local government. Despite that, there were closures of schools and other facilities like that. It was not easy. We realized that because of lack of connectivity, lack of infrastructure for connectivity, we could not connect the rural and the urban. And one other critical lesson we had was that women, or girls rather, when they were not going to school, they were being abused in the houses, and we ended up having an increase in early pregnancies. So this is what led us as a government of Malawi to look into what governance systems do we need to reform. The policies and the laws had to be reviewed, be looked at. Do we have the policies that can protect? And then because of that, we have Personal Data Privacy Act and with cybersecurity regulatory frameworks that are underway, being developed. But also here at the UN, we have the the Convention on the Fight Against Cybersecurity. Malawi is party to that. And in terms of accountability mechanisms, we do have them. Various stakeholders, as I've said, have already developed a number of mechanisms for including grievance redress mechanisms, compliance, dispute resolution mechanisms, even ISO for transparency and documentation toolkits, and many others. And you know, talking about the continental AI strategy, which is the Africa one, which is people-centric, development-oriented, and inclusive. What we need from partners, international partners, is that we need to strengthen our partnerships by having more support in implementation of the commitments that have been made here at the UN globally. And also this implementation would require predictable and adequate financing, and also ensuring technology transfer that will put to scale any technology innovations that are out there. We need to build capacities. We need to minimize risks. We need to stimulate investment and even foster more cooperation. So what is critical thing to be done is to integrate AI into the digital technology into the education system, from early child development to the tertiary, so that every human being, every person in Malawi, on the continent of Africa, is prepared to really manage and to be able to use AI for their benefits and for the benefit of their communities and the country in general. So really, I agree with Professor Muhammadou that we need Africa-led data, and language that will help us to be able to use AI to our benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that perspective. I think that, it sounds very much as the African Union's continental AI strategy encompasses a lot of what we were talking about, right? Governance in that. But in the AI systems that are embedded in governance for low resource settings like policing or social services, what accountability mechanism currently exists and what guardrails do you think need to be built right now?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have the legal frameworks, the Private Data Protection Act, the other regulations that are being developed. So even in the convention, the Global Convention on the Cybersecurity, we need to domesticate them. In terms of the social services, the health, we have in the health sector, in fact, in Malawi, what started the real game changer was the adoption of the biometric identity system. So we have a national ID which has biometric data for every person, and that has been really a game changer in the health system for health social services. They are able to use that to really, even that would be used even for accountability system in terms of tracking who is doing what. Similarly, in payment systems, we are using the national ID to really do the know your customer system for the payment system with the banks, private banks, and the government Reserve Bank of Malawi. So even in terms of judiciary access to justice, we are using the same, and they are creating AI mechanisms that will ensure that there's accountability vis-a-vis access to justice. So what are the gaps that really the infrastructure is what is the major gap? We need more investment in the AI infrastructure in the various sectors, multi-sectoral, in the health sector, education sector, as I mentioned, the judiciary, even in other sectors, even local government. Local government will be very, very key because these are the people serving the rural people where the majority of the population is, and they need the accountability systems there that will save and protect the people and their privacy and their livelihoods. So we need major international partnerships that will come and help us in technology transfer, in capability of building capacities, and also financing.
Thank you, Ambassador Chimbiri-Molande. I appreciate your perspective. Now I'm going to bring Dr. Najoua, our other panelist. She is the Economic Advisor and Sustainable Development Expert for the Union of Arab Chambers. Dr. Najoua is an ESG integration, digital transformation, and climate entrepreneurship specialist at the intersection of regional policy and government development. She is a research associate at the American University of Beirut, advancing inclusive economic growth across the Arab region. Welcome, Dr. Najoua.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I don't believe this is a single institutional responsibility for building system readiness. In fact, this assumption is part of the problem. When we say, for example, if AI is already arriving in communities that are not ready for it, who is responsible for building system readiness And what does accountability look like? AI is transforming our societies faster than any single government, company, or organization can respond. If we continue to think in silos, we will always be reacting to technology instead of shaping it. So I would replace the question of who is responsible with a different one. How do we distribute responsibility across the entire ecosystem? Systems readiness is a shared responsibility because governments are responsible for creating enabling policies and regulatory frameworks. The private sector is responsible for developing AI ethically and investing in workforce transformation. Universities and research institutions are responsible for developing the skills and knowledge that future economies require, and international organizations provide the common vision and global framework. Institutions, such the Union of Arab Chambers, have a unique responsibility to connect these actors, to translate policy into practice, facilitate dialogue, and build trust, and ensure that businesses, particularly SMEs, are not left behind. So to me, accountability therefore looks less like compliance and more like collaboration, because success should not only be measured by how advanced our AI systems become, but by whether they create better jobs, more competitive SMEs, stronger institutions, and more inclusive opportunities. Because ultimately, AI readiness is not a technology indicator. It is an institutional indicator. If our institutions are ready, our societies will be ready.
Dr. Najoua, that, I think that's a phenomenal perspective. I think you are right. If institutions are not ready, your people can't be ready either. So despite these unprecedented advances in AI, progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals still remain uneven. From the perspective of the Union of Arab Chambers, why does this disconnect persist? And what do you believe is still missing from the global conversation?
Thank you. This is a very important question. I actually believe we are witnessing one of the greatest paradoxes of our time. Humanity has never had access to more intelligence, yet it has rarely faced greater difficulty in acting collectively. We are investing billions in AI while significantly under-investing in what I call collective intelligence. Our ability as institutions, governments, businesses, and societies to work together around shared objectives. And this is where I believe SDGs should be understood differently. We often think of them as development goals. I would argue they are fundamentally coordination goals. Climate change is not waiting for a better algorithm. Food security is not limited by lack of data. Energy transition is not constrained by computed power. The challenge is that knowledge remains fragmented, institutions remain fragmented, markets also remain fragmented, policies remain fragmented. AI can process complexity, but it cannot replace trust. It cannot negotiate partnerships. It cannot align institutions around a common vision. Only people and the institutions can do this. This is why I believe human infrastructure is becoming just as important as digital infrastructure, because it is the invisible operating system of development. It is the ability of institutions to cooperate across sectors, across borders, and across disciplines. It is what transforms technological capability into societal impact. So across 22 Arab countries, the Union of Arab Chambers facilitate dialogue between governments, businesses, investors, entrepreneurs, academia, and development partners. We are helping transform global frameworks into regional cooperation, because when we translate policy into implementation, we connect innovation ecosystems that would otherwise remain isolated, because innovation does not scale through software alone, it scales through ecosystems, and ecosystems require trust.
Thank you. You, as well as His Excellency Ka, had talked about a collective intelligence. I think that is so very important to ensure that there is inclusive voices, right, of people who have not been included. What does that mean in practice, and what concrete actions should policymakers, businesses, and regional institutions take to ensure that AI accelerates the SDGs in human-centered and inclusive ways?
Well, when I speak about collective intelligence, I'm referring to the ability of people, institutions, and organizations to work together towards a shared purpose. AI can process enormous amounts of information, but it cannot replace trust, collaboration, or even collective decision making. And these remain uniquely human capabilities, and they are the real drivers of sustainable development. So if you want AI to accelerate the SDGs in a meaningful and inclusive way, I believe we need three fundamental shifts. First, we need to move from AI strategies to AI ecosystems. Many countries are investing in digital infrastructure and AI roadmaps, which is essential. But technology alone does not generate inclusion. We must invest equally in the institutions that enable people and businesses to adopt AI responsibly. Business support organizations, digital skills, regulatory capacity, and innovation network. Second, we must place SMEs at the center of the AI transition. Across the Arab region and around the world, SMEs are the backbone of our economies. Yet, they often lack access to finance, expertise, data, and trusted guidance. If AI only benefits large corporations, it will widen inequalities instead of reducing them, because inclusive innovation means ensuring that smaller businesses can participate, compete, and grow in the digital economy. The third shift is that we need to transform partnerships into implementation mechanisms. Too often, global commitments remain at the level of principles. The Global Digital Compact provides an important vision, but its real success will depend on how effectively it is translated into practical action. This is where regional institutions such as the Union of Arab Chambers can make a unique contribution. Because ultimately, collective intelligence is what allows artificial intelligence to create real impact. Technology may provide the tools, but institutions provide the trust, partnerships create the scale, and people create the transformation. Only when these three elements come together, where can AI become a catalyst for achieving the SDGs and ensuring that no one is left behind.
I think, I think it's so true that the collaboration and, everybody being part of the fabric of what is occurring is the most important thing. Without everybody having a voice included, the technology will continue to be fragmented. Thank you so much. I am going to introduce our final panelist on our panel, Mr. George Tsiatis, the CEO and co-founder of Resolution Project. He is a social entrepreneur leader, building systems that identify and invest in young change makers globally. Resolution's project's model is backing leaders before they have credentials, which embodies the human infrastructure approach that we have all talked about and championed during this event. Welcome, George.
Thanks so much, TeHsing, for this invitation and for creating this space for this conversation. It's hard to imagine a more important conversation at this moment in time. And, I think there's a part of me that just wants to say, everyone look at Isaiah and understand that this is what we need to invest in. But there's also another part that wants to bring together some of the pieces that help someone like Isaiah not just find platforms like this, but also to become a trusted source of that bridge between communities, many vulnerable communities, and technological tools that, when deployed thoughtfully and in collaboration partnership with them, can really bring about the transformation that we're looking for and help us move faster and access that force multiplier that this technology should be providing us in chasing down these SDGs that we're running out of time on. So I think I'll just maybe share one bit of context in how I think about this, and then we can press forward a bit. But I think it's important to acknowledge that as much as there has been so much movement and there's been so much pace and speed at which this technology has been moving, we're still in the very early stages. And I think at this moment we've been making a bit of a mistake in how we've prioritized the approach of it, and that is that we've been trying to replicate ourselves with this technology. And so, in fact, there's sort of many of you, I'm sure, have heard of the Turing test, and we have models that now pass the Turing test. But the question is, do we need models that are able to mimic us? Or do we need a set of tools that provide that sort of power, that speed and that pace, that throughput to move us from where we are to where we need to be a lot faster? And so, in working with a lot of young social entrepreneurs, we see that their approach begins with people and runs through technology and then ends with people. And I think that's a framework that's particularly helpful and critical in engaging on this topic and in thinking about how this can, in fact, transform our society for the better.
Thank you, George. I've been lucky enough to mentor in your organization. I have found a lot of the young people doing exactly that, right? Their ideas, their innovations are for the people, and they are trying to use the technology that they have on hand in order to make it available for the people. So I think that is absolutely needed and necessary to bring the human touch to it. What support structures, given that you're social entrepreneurs, right? You provide so much resources currently for the social entrepreneurs that you support. What support structures do you think are going to make the difference between an idea that comes to be to a real change in the communities that they are? Because I do find that sometimes they need more funding and they need more support than they currently get.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm frankly really heartened to hear the ambassadors on this in this conversation who have spoken so openly and so specifically about supporting youth, both as part of the conversation and as a part of the actors that can move things forward. Because really, they need money, they need resources and mentorship and expertise, but they also need trust and opportunities. Right, and that is a critical piece that, at an institutional level, is generally in short supply for youth. And so, when you think about the systems that we have that engage young people, the main one is actually the education system, and through no fault of its own, I think the education systems right now globally are in a very difficult place, because when a young person enters an education system in primary school, the idea is that within, call it 12 to 14 years, that person is able to fend for themselves and to hopefully thrive in society and be self-sustaining, self-sufficient. To do that, you sort of have to understand what society will look like in 14 years. And that is an impossible task at the moment. So what we've been doing heavily is supplementing traditional education with a layer of entrepreneurship training. and that entrepreneurship training focuses on problem solving. It focuses on systems orchestration. It focuses on critical thinking, on creative thinking, on continuous learning, right? Feedback loops and cycles, and how those come into play. Of course, with the social layer of social entrepreneurship, the overall impacts of those approaches come into play in a big way. And so, when we think about what young people need to be successful in this, they need more than what we've been giving them. And any chance you have, whether it's perhaps as a mentor to support and engage a young person, but really something that everyone can do is to cheer on the young people and to support their journeys and to encourage them to keep pushing and to keep trying. And to some degree, there'll be failures in there, many of them. But in each failure, there's a lesson and opportunity, and the space that you can create through supportive resources, through building a partnership, through being a customer of a young person's project, by just having a kind word for them, right? All of these things can make a difference. So that's where I would say that the needs are strongest, and the opportunities for all of us to layer in are richest.
I think that is, around the world, not just in, nations, underserved or underprivileged nations. I think it is the education system, I think, is very much grappling with how to teach children. Do they, as I have a 13-year-old, do they just introduce technology and use technology? And I would agree with you that it really is teaching them critical thinking that they don't necessarily get as quickly now, because AI is at their fingertips here in the US. I have one more quick question, and then we'll close it out. Social innovation is sometimes treated as a complement to formal infrastructure, right? Something that fills the gap while the government catches up. Can you make the case that young social entrepreneurs are really not gap fillers, they are infrastructure builders? And what does the global, and you have already answered this part, which is global development, right, needs more funding, more support. But, are they just fillers, or are they really helping to push governments forward in what is needed and having the government see what is needed?
Yeah, it's a very insightful question. And it's something that comes up a fair bit. The thing is that without that filling, something isn't complete, right? So of course it's essential to have the pieces filled, otherwise it's an outline. Dr. Najoua mentioned institutional readiness as a metric for understanding the institution's readiness to take on AI. And, I think we can all agree that institutions generally aren't ready. And again, sort of through no fault of their own, they weren't built that way. They weren't built to be prepared for something like this, to be ready for something like this. And so, when you look at that, right, these institutions are also not in a place to take on individual, youth social entrepreneurs in exploring potential solutions, right? But they can build systems that incentivize, encourage, and embrace these young people, their ideas, and their leadership as an essential part of the puzzle. So, if we want these institutions to be ready at this pace and at this speed, we need agility, right? We need agile approaches to help move this forward in a way that actually keeps up or sort of augments our opportunities and utilizing this technology. And so if institutions try to just sort of become that, I think many of them will struggle and fail if they try to do that in short supply. However, there are service core models that exist. There are studios that exist. And these are things where metrics and parameters can be put into place to really support this sort of work across a broad category of youth in a society and in a country and in a municipality and across a number of different geographic regions. And that is, I think, where the big opportunity here sits. It's as if we face these sort of existential issues and, we're leaving a third of our team off the field because they're young. And yet we've seen that they are the natives to this technology. They're fluent with this technology in a way that many of us from a generation or two ahead of them aren't. So why wouldn't we find ways to tap into them and bring them along as part of the infrastructure, as part of the team? And I think that's where we stand to have one of the largest boosts. Microfinance in a number of countries brought women into the economy in an incredibly powerful way. I think this is our moment and our opportunity to bring youth into not just the economy, but into problem solving at an incredible scale that does build around people. And that's where I'd focus and orient that part of the conversation.
Thank you, George. I wanted to thank all the panelists. I think what each of you have brought and your perspectives are so enlightening and welcoming. I am excited to hear of all the conversations that are going on and how productive they seem to be. I think in closing the fabric, it sounded like everyone talked about, it's the inclusion, right? Everybody needs to be inclusion in this fabric of AI. And going forward, we have to make sure we don't forget the youth, the women, and all the countries around the world. If the human infrastructure is not ready, well, the institutions aren't going to, might propel it a little bit, but won't propel it to the extent that we need them to make sure that this is for all people. So I appreciate everybody's perspective.
Wow, panel 2, you were amazing. And I am truly hearing a common thread here today, an overarching storyline, and that is collective intelligence. We must have trust. Oh, this has been so enlightening, and I can't wait to even take this information back to my own local community. And I believe that as we continue to use this information locally and globally, we will truly be living in a better world. Thank you, panel 2.
It's all in our hands, this life of time that's given to us all. It gathers round each night, each morn. We watch it pass and grow. It is all in our hands, it is all in our hands. With every fear the sound